Like, what is the takeaway that the filmmaker wants viewers to have? What are some of the philosophical, theological presuppositions that the filmmaker has that we can discern? So I would say of those two types of discernment, the content is easier, right? Because it's obvious. Like, you can watch a film and you can easily count how many F words there are, or how many like scenes of explicit sexuality there are. The discernment on the worldview level is the harder task because it's not always obvious, and you have to sometimes kind of watch a film and then sit back and think about it. And that's the work that I undertake. That's what I see as my contribution as a Christian film critic. I do the work of watching a film, and then like sitting with it and thinking, going a layer deeper than, okay, there's the obvious content and maybe the obvious meaning of a film, but there's sometimes layers of subtlety that we don't pick up as quickly, but are still there, and they still form us, whether we know it or not. So I find this particularly important with kids' movies, actually. As a parent, maybe I'm very alert to this now, but we often think about kids' movies, anything on Disney Plus, for example, as like, well, obviously, like, we don't need to worry about these because they're like rated G, they're rated PG, there's not any like nudity or anything that's going to show up on the screen. And even if the story seems on the surface to be neutral or kind of just a feel-good kind of kid story, I find that a lot of times if you go some layers deeper, there's really problematic kind of worldview assumptions at play that are that our children, as they watch these films, are picking up, over time. And for the generation that was raised on kind of Disney in the 80s and 90s, as I was, I think there's just a lot that has shaped us, in those films that wasn't obvious. So I wrote about this last week with a Little Mermaid review. I don't know if you saw that, but so yeah, that's just one example of like the discernment on the worldview level takes more time. You really have to put your thinking cap on, and I think that goes against the grain of our typical mode of movie watching, which is kind of like go into the theater, have a fun time, and then maybe talk about, did you like it, did you not like it, for 5 minutes as we walk to the car, and then it's done, and then we move on to the next thing. And I just think that posture of consuming really powerful stories, but then like moving on so quickly that we never really think carefully about what was the actual like message that movie was trying to convey. But that can feel like a tension with the enjoyment part, right? Because if enjoying a movie is good, as I'm arguing that it is, some people might be like, well, it's kind of a buzzkill to like have to discuss it, and to really analyze the messages after it. Like, can't we just enjoy The Flash or, Spider-Verse and just be done with that and like go on our merry way? And why do we have to like think so hard about it? So I don't know. That's just my perspective. Is movies shape us whether we want them to or not, and whether we're aware of it or not. And so Christians especially need to be alert to that and think a little bit more carefully about how that happens.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, so I'm I'm into philosophy and apologetics. That's always been my big thing for a long time now. And so whenever I approach art in general, I approach it in a very, the way that I approach it has been heavily influenced by people like Francis Schaeffer and Nancy Pearcey. So I approach it with what you're talking about in mind, which is enjoyment. Like I said earlier, I'm not an art house movie guy. I'm a simple guy. But at the same time, I do approach art, whether it's movies or other things, with those worldview questions in mind.